What's going on, guys? This is VinylicPuma. It's been a while since I did a Borderlands 2 and pre-sequel countdown video, but today I wanted to go over 10 of what I think are among some of the best melee guns, weapons, and Roid Shields in Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel. Now before we start, this video is going to include a wide variety of items of various different functions. With that in mind, I'm ranking these entries in terms of their usefulness and prestige rather than their overall power. So in general, the higher something is on this list, the more useful or desirable it will be for any melee build. Also, there were a few things that I wanted to include here but didn't, so if you do have any of your favorites that didn't make it onto this list, feel free to let everyone know what they are in the comments section below. But without further ado, these are my top 10 best melee guns, weapons, and Roid Shields in Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, starting now. Number 10. The Swagga SMG from Borderlands 2. Now, to be honest, I'd recommend a bunch of other weapons above the Swagga due to their ability to have passive healing or just superior melee damage bonus, but a bladed Swagga isn't a bad choice, assuming you can get your hands on one. The advantage I'd say that the Swagga has over the other melee weapons mostly just comes down to its projectile multiplier and very high slag chance. Many other weapons, regardless of whether they are able to heal the player or have a slag element, aren't quite as effective in this department. Plus, it's also worth mentioning that the Swagga is just versatile in general. It's a great weapon for setting up enemies so that they can take more damage from your rocket launchers, grenades, and other ranged weapons. So if you find you aren't using the melee aspect of a bladed version quite as much, you can always use the Swagga as a means to set up enemies to deal more damage to them in other ways. The problem with the Swagga, though, is what I alluded to earlier, and that is just that it's hard to get when compared to the vast majority of the other melee weapons on this list. That's especially the case if you want a bladed variant that's ideal for melee. If you want a Swagga, you'll have to get it to drop from Tector and Jimbo Hodunk, provided you end up siding with the Zaffords in the dust during the Clan War chain of side quests. Otherwise, you're kinda out of luck, as you'll either have to reset your playthrough so you can farm this thing reliably, or you're just gonna have to get it to drop from any suitable loot source. Number 9. The Law Pistol and Order Shield from Borderlands 2. While these are two separate items, with the Law being a pistol and the Order being a Roid Shield, both of these items are best used together. However, if you for some reason don't have access to any of Borderlands 2's DLC, you could feasibly use the Law as it has the highest bonus to melee damage of any non-DLC weapon, which will allow you to maximize the damage of your melee strikes. When it comes to the Order Shield, it's got pretty decent stats and is capable of having superior Roid damage to the left Thumper, though you do lose out on the amazing recharge delay that the left Thumper has. Like I sort of alluded to earlier, and while the Law and Order are decent on their own, they are best used together to achieve a healing effect whenever you successfully melee. This should allow you to deal a decent amount of melee damage while also recovering a portion of your health. The reason neither of these weapons are higher on this list comes down to the fact that other items on this list are better than the Law and Order individually, as well as when both items are used together. There are weapons that outpace the Law's melee damage bonus, there are Roid Shields that outpace the Order's Roid bonus, and there are just single weapons with better health recovery than when both the Law and Order are used together. Otherwise, though, the Law and Order are excellent in the early parts of the game or if you don't have the DLC. And if you want them, be sure to complete the Won't Get Fooled Again side quest for the Law and the BFF side quest for the Order. Both of these quests should be fairly easy to find as both are located within Sanctuary. Number 8. The Ruby Pistol from Borderlands 2. So, the Ruby is the best non-DLC, non-condition dependent Moxie weapon that you can get in terms of percentage-based healing, with the ability to heal the player at a rate of 12% of all damage inflicted. This is actually pretty good when you consider that most other Moxie weapons are capable of around 2 to 4% healing from all damage dealt. In the end, while it's probably better to use another infamous Maliwan pistol that we'll be talking about later on in this video, it might actually be a good idea to go ahead and acquire Ruby just in case you can't use that thing. So I'd at least recommend taking on the Rackaholics Anonymous side quest mission and turning it into Moxie to get your hands on a Ruby. Number 7. The Shooting Star Shield from Borderlands the pre-sequel. While the Big Thumper is a little bit stronger than the Shooting Star in terms of roid damage, the Shooting Star has the upper hand when it comes to pretty much every other attribute. Not only does the Shooting Star have slightly longer recharge delay, which makes it easier to use, but it also has the benefit of having a designated drop area as well, as you can farm this thing from the Lost Legion Powersuit Noob during or after the Red Then Dead side quest in the Lunar Launching Station. As for its gimmick, the Shooting Star causes shooting star/meteorite type explosions provided you melee enemies with the Roid effect active. This is actually kind of nice when going up against frozen enemies, as they will not only be taking more damage from your melee attacks, but they will also be taking more damage from the explosive portion of your attack as well, which is pretty nice if you ask me. Ultimately, the Shooting Star is the Roid Shield most people pick up in the pre-sequel due to how it's easier to get than its two legendary alternatives. At the very least, I'd recommend picking one of these things up while you're waiting for the Avalanche to drop. Number 6. The Excalibur laser from Borderlands the pre-sequel. While other cryo-based or cryo-variant lasers are also a popular choice for melee playstyles, the Excalibur tends to be my personal favorite. Not only is the Excalibur an awesome ranged weapon with very high accuracy, but it also essentially has 100% freeze chance provided you're able to score either a ranged or melee critical. This latter property in particular is very useful as it allows you to freeze enemies and opens them up to take more damage from your melee attacks. It also doesn't hurt that meleeing frozen enemies can generate a singularity and subsequent cryonova, which is incredibly useful as well, and has some pretty great chaining potential. My only real complaint with the Excalibur is that it can only really normally be acquired once per character. Granted, you can receive the Excalibur via the grinder, but normally when you go to Stanton's Liver and pull the Excalibur out of the stone there, you can only do it once per character, meaning you won't get any UVHM resets, and if you did this in, say, normal or true Vault Hunter mode, you'll have to obtain the Excalibur through other methods. All in all, though, the Excalibur is a phenomenal melee weapon, and you should definitely reach maximum level and pick this thing up for your character. It sucks you can only really obtain it once, but I think it's also fair to say that waiting is certainly worth it. Number 5. The Phrygia SMG from Borderlands the pre-sequel. The Phrygia is a much better version of the Swagga from Borderlands the pre-sequel. Not only is it much easier to get, as it's a quest reward for completing the Imperfect Hibernation quest in the Veins of Helios, but it's also worth pointing out that the Phrygia is Cryo Element, which tends to be a little bit better for melee than Slag. Plus, since it's sort of like the pre-sequel's take on the Swagga from Borderlands 2, you're getting really high freeze chance, which should allow you to easily freeze most enemies that you would ever come into contact with. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot else to this gun, and if you're looking for an awesome melee weapon for the pre-sequel, I would highly recommend a bladed Phrygia. It's got good DPS, it's a great way to freeze enemies, and I think you'll find that you'll be pretty happy with it for melee as well. Number 4. The Love Thumper Shield from Borderlands 2. While it doesn't possess the highest roid damage of any of the unique roid shields in Borderlands 2, the Love Thumper is arguably one of the most useful. This is mostly because the Love Thumper has an insanely high recharge delay, which allows you to keep the roid damage effects active virtually indefinitely. Granted, your shields will eventually recharge if you get second winds or if you wait long enough, but if you're consistently taking damage and healing that damage back, you can keep the Love Thumper's roid damage active for virtually forever. The awesome thing about this is that it makes the Love Thumper far easier to use than any of the other roid shields in Borderlands 2. After all, you don't have to wait on precise timing in order to consistently maximize your roid damage. The downside or bad thing about this, though, is that the Love Thumper will deal damage to co-op partners as a part of its special effect, which is a problem if you're playing in multiplayer matches with other people. Otherwise, I don't think there's much else to say about the Love Thumper other than it's a really great roid shield for single-player play. If you want it, be sure to complete the Best Mother's Day Ever side quest that's located in the Highlands. Number 3. The Grog Nozzle Pistol from Borderlands 2. While it's far more difficult and less reliable to get an Evisceration Grog Nozzle now due to how the Grog Nozzle isn't farmable anymore, you can always start and never complete the Beard Makes the Man side quest to acquire your Grog Nozzle that way. Granted, this means you can't necessarily rely on it if you play in co-op matches with someone that decides to complete or never start that quest, but you should be able to still get a random version of the Grog Nozzle for single player, or if you are playing as the host in a co-op match. What makes the Grog Nozzle such a phenomenal melee weapon is that it's slag, and it heals the player at a rate of 65% of damage done from all sources. So whether that's a melee attack, a grenade throw, or just conventional shots, you should be able to heal off of it, which is great for survivability and preferable to any other method available. In fact, I suppose you could think of the Grog Nozzle as a superpowered ruby, however with lower base damage, a powerful drunk effect that can occasionally occur, and just considerably more powerful healing. The only lousy thing is that the Grog isn't farmable, though I suppose if you know somebody that's successfully farmed for one 5 years ago during the $100,000 loot hunt, you could probably trade with them. However, I would say at that point, I'd just recommend you start the Beard Makes the Man side quest and just never complete that side quest. Ultimately, the Grog Nozzle is phenomenal, and if you're putting together a high-level melee build, I would say that this particular weapon is essential. Number 2. The Rapier Assault Rifle from Borderlands 2. Without a doubt, the Rapier is the single strongest melee weapon in Borderlands 2 with DLC. This is because it dwarfs the law's inherent melee damage bonus of 100% with a value of 200%, which makes the Rapier twice as effective as the law in improving the damage of your melee attacks. It also doesn't hurt that the Rapier can come in multiple elements, making slag variants especially valuable as you can potentially slag and then charge an enemy to finish them with a melee attack. With all of this said though, using the Rapier has a catch. Not only is the Rapier's base damage terrible, which makes it really lousy as a conventional rifle, but the Rapier also has a unique curse effect, which makes the user take increased damage from enemy melee attacks. Thus, it's best to swap to the Rapier when you need to deal a really strong melee attack, rather than using it as a conventional weapon. At the same time, a character like Zero can mitigate the risk of getting meleeed thanks to Deception, which does allow you to be invisible. Alternatively though, and like I said earlier, it's really just best to swap to the Rapier as needed, rather than just use one all of the time. Overall though, this is probably the best melee weapon from both of the Borderlands games, and if you want it, be sure to pick it up by completing the Message in a Bottle side quest from Hater's Folly in the Captain Scarlet DLC. And finally, number 1, the Hide of Terramorphous and the Avalanche Shields from Borderlands 2 and Borderlands the Pre-Sequel. As far as Roid Shields go, both the Borderlands 2's Hide of Terramorphous and the pre-sequel's Avalanche tend to be the best Roid Shields from their respective games. However, the reason I'm including both of these together is because of how similar they are. Both are Roid Shields that incorporate properties of Nova and Spike Shields. However, the difference is that the Hide of Terramorphous from Borderlands 2 is predominantly fire element, while the Avalanche from the pre-sequel is predominantly cryo element. Because the Avalanche is cryo, I'd say it might be a little bit stronger thanks to how melee attacks are so effective against frozen enemies. That and the Avalanche has more ideal recharge delay, which makes using the Avalanche a little bit easier than the Hide of Terramorphous. That said, it is worth mentioning that the Roid damage on the Avalanche is similar to what you might have seen on other legendary Roid shields like the Big Thumper and Shooting Star from the pre-sequel, while the Hide of Terramorphous is in a total class of its own in Borderlands 2, as it undisputedly has the highest Roid damage of any Roid shield. There's also the fact that the Avalanche is much harder to get than the Hide of Terramorphous, as it used to be a drop from a Jury Mirror, but is now currently a world drop that you're just going to have to get lucky to find out in the wild. By comparison, if you defeat Terramorphous enough times in Borderlands 2, you should be able to get your hands on a Hide of Terramorphous. Overall, and as far as comparing both the Hide of Terramorphous and Avalanche goes, I think it's fair to say that both of these Roid shields excel in their respective games. So I'd recommend you be on the lookout for these, as they will greatly improve the strength of your melee attacks, and they are really essential at those higher level difficulties. Alright guys, thank you all for watching, and I think that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you liked this video, feel free to leave a like, click the bell so you can be notified when I upload more videos, and as always, and again, thank you all so much for supporting this channel, take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.